been living on Sydney's northern beaches for about 15 years now. She's still very connected with the community and all the causes that she stands up for.
I've been campaigning to have the shark nets moved from the beaches for a long time. They catch so few potentially dangerous animals.
I'd like to welcome our first very special and very exciting guest, Valerie Taylor, to come and speak to you all today.
We owe the marine world to stop this mesh killing. It's time they were pulled out.
Valerie, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I've been a big fan.
You've inspired generations of conservationists and people advocating for sharks.
I don't have much life left, I don't think, but I would like to see those nets out. If push comes to shove, I might go down there and start cutting an animal out and wait to be arrested. Nothing like television to get something done, to let the people know.
Anybody growing up in the 60s and 70s would know Valerie Taylor.
We find that sharks attack more readily when we float on the surface.
She was a pioneer of her time, and she still is.
Valerie was the lady in the pink wetsuit doing all these amazing things with sharks.
Ron and Val's concern is not for themselves, but for the sharks.
When they started to look at sharks differently, I think the influence in the Australian community was phenomenal.
But this kind of courage has helped make her one of the world's champion women of the sea.
Here was a woman doing what was supposedly only the domain of men. Was she less fearful than most? Absolutely.
I mean, standing on the edge of a cliff to me is sheer bravery. Jumping in amongst a bunch of sharks, good fun.
Valerie, looking good.
I'm very old now, and I would love to have a quiet life, but really, there's so much to be done. We are killing the planet that supports us. I'm not a marine biologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a stupid old lady who happens to know.
I've been working with Valerie probably for about a year now. She's been a long-time supporter of the Australian Marine Conservation Society, who I work for, and there's a couple of big issues, and one of them is the shark nets.
So these nets, Valerie, just out past there, a few hundred metres off from shore.
I don't know quite what to do. I just know what it's like to see beautiful animals struggling away.
Some people argue that prior to shark nets, there were a lot more fatalities, but we're advocating for more modern-day methods.
I mean, we've got the technology, we've got drones, we can tag and track them, and we can make the beaches safer.
But the main problem we're primarily working on is increasing the protections for critically endangered grey nurse shark on the east coast of Australia. The grey nurse shark has always had a special place in Valerie's heart. We know they've been on quite a sharp decline, and that's largely because of spearfishing and recreational fishing.
And right now I'm working on having their habitats protected. But speaking from experience, I know that working on conservation of the marine world, it's a huge battle. Every success follows a dozen failures.
As a conservationist, the most important thing I've learned from Valerie is don't give up.
I was born in Crown Street Hospital, Sydney, 1935. The boys came later, which was good. I was the boss of everybody. I was the eldest. I moved to New Zealand with my parents when I was 3.5. There was a war on. My mother, and I'd say all the mothers in the street, they worked at home. They used to go out and grow vegetables.
Valerie and my father had a childhood of poverty. They always had food on the table, but there was never any excess. But they always had the love of their parents, which was a big thing.
My mother realised that I wasn't ever going to be academic, and she always encouraged me with my drawings and paintings. I could paint, I was good at all the crafts, and I was good at sport. Well, I was good at sport until I got polio.
When Valerie was 12, she was diagnosed with polio. That was obviously a big shock for the family. She went into hospital. She was in there for about 3 months. And there was really questions as to whether she was going to make it through and be all right.
I couldn't walk, I couldn't sit up, couldn't move my right arm or hand, and I was in constant pain. Deep in your bones are shrinking, your body's shrivelling, and the treatment was hot packs, very hot packs. They'd wrap you up in hot towels and then wrap you in a canvas and leave you there for a while. And then they'd unwrap you and they would start stretching you. And a doctor or a worker in the hospital would grab my leg and slowly pull it till I was screaming, then release it. And here I am. No calipers.
When Valerie was in hospital, she started reading, and books like, you know, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn and all those old classics.
And I had to wait for a nurse to come up along to turn a page. But I started training my left arm to creep up on the platform. Once it got up there, I could hang on. And with a bit of difficulty to turn the pages for myself. There's no doubt that those books changed my life. They were the books that told me I could have an adventure. By the time I got out of hospital, academically I was far behind. When I turned 15, my mother said, Valerie, you're 15 today, you leave school tomorrow, and you go out and get a job. My mother brought all her children up to believe they were beautiful, intelligent, clever, always admiring everything we did. And I thought, I could do anything I want. The world is mine.
Valerie and the family moved back to Australia, and it wasn't long after that that she got a job with Press Features, and she was basically redrawing American cartoons to be published here in Australia.
The guy in charge of Australia, Mr. Menzies, would not import anything into Australia if it could be done here. They're all American comics. And there was, well, you can see, Dippy the Duck, Foxy Fagin, Muggsy Mouse, and Little Abner. We used the same commentary, but Australianised it, took out the American slang.
After Valerie's day job working at Press Features, she'd often work the nights modelling, where she'd pose for an art class.
She just had a knack of seeing an opportunity. Even though Valerie had never had any formal acting training, she'd go off and audition for parts.
I was 26 when I read for a part in a play called The 7-Year Itch, and I got the part.
Valerie, how much acting had you done before you got this lead in The 7-Year Itch?
Well, this is the first time I've been on the stage. Before I got this part, I hadn't even seen a play, actually.
But these things don't just happen.
But it does. Well, it happened to me.
And she just fell into it. It wasn't like this big career choice that she was making, and was a bit of a natural on the stage.
So you don't try to imitate Marilyn Monroe?
No, I couldn't. I'm not the type. She's got a much bigger bust than I have and much bigger everything.
It lasted for about 6 months, and it could have kept going, except that I wanted to do other things. I wanted something more adventurous. When my family moved back to Australia, we lived close to the ocean, and we taught ourselves to dive, And one day, a guy called Bruno saw me spearing fish, and he said, "We don't have any good women spearfishing. Would you join the club?" So I joined the club, and that's where I met Ron. He was the best spearfisherman in the world, and he was beautiful, and he was gentle.
And I saw this pretty blonde girl in the club, and during an outing down at Guatemala, I asked if she would swim in front of my camera for me, and she did. And I thought, wow, she looks good.
That was really my introduction to getting to know marine animals really well. I would not have made such an impact on him if I hadn't have been willing to swim around and do things with marine animals.
I think a lot of girls just paddle around to please their boyfriends. But Valerie is genuinely interested in the undersea life.
I was slender and long, and I suppose I looked pretty good in those days. I'd frighten everybody today.
And then in 1960, Valerie and I were at the same film festival at Heron Island, Underwater Film Festival.
They had a competition for Miss Heron every year. And it wasn't just looking beautiful in a bathing costume. You had to do a series of underwater tricks. Well, that was no problem for me. I could hold my breath for a long time. So I went to Miss Heron and won. And it was where we actually became, he became my boyfriend. Ron always wanted to be a photographer, and he hoped to be able to make a living as a cameraman.
Ron was the very quiet, retiring guy who was a technical genius, built all of his own camera housings and equipment.
Back in the early days, Ron, being one of the only people filming underwater, they could see the commercial potential for this.
It was difficult at first. It wasn't instant success because when we first started, we had no reputation.
But he found he could sell his 16mm black and white film to Movie Tone News for £25 an item. That was huge.
Movie Tone's underwater cameraman Ron Taylor rolls our film, and first up, spots a couple of sand rays.
So every weekend, Ron and I'd go out looking for action, and it had to be something big, something dangerous. Sharks.
We're on a shark hunt, and Valerie wastes no time getting on his tail.
It was all then about shark the predator, shark the danger, and of course, sharks can be dangerous.
When I first started snorkeling and diving, I was worried about sharks.
It was drummed into you to be petrified of sharks. The shark alarm would go off on the beach and everybody'd run, and it was shark, shark. You're going to be eaten alive if you don't get out of the water.
In the 60s, there were several people killed in shark attacks in Sydney Harbour, in waist-deep water. And grey nurse sharks had a bad reputation. A grey nurse has this sort of tangled teeth, and so the immediate thought was they're the killer. But these shark attacks weren't grey nurse.
Finally, to round off a good day's sport, we've got a grey nurse in our sight. A beautifully streamlined 10 to 12 feet of sudden death.
One of the early films that Ron made was called Revenge of a Shark Victim. We used a friend of ours who had been bitten by a shark.
And with a .303 cartridge in his spear gun, revenge is sweet.
We're not proud of it, because his revenge was killing grey nurse.
And there it is. Hit in the spine, the grey nurse dies almost instantly. And that's none too soon for us.
You were a big hero if you went out and speared and killed a shark. You were saving thousands of lives by killing this monster.
The films that they produced, they spent their time going around New South Wales and other parts, showing these to sort of little groups who would, basically relish the idea that they're shooting these killers.
I've collected a lot of stuff over the years, drawers of it, shelves of it, and here's some posters. They're very old. We'd hire a barn or a hall or something, And for a few shillings, the general public could come in and see this. We'd stick these posters up. And it paid for our petrol, our camping fees, and our food. By now, I'm going out with Ron, basically spearfishing, or to be on camera. But when I first met Ron, I had a boyfriend. Gary was a guitarist and a singer. And one day I said, Ron, I said, if you don't want to marry me, I'll marry Gary, because he's asked me. And Ron said, let's get married now. You could see his on-camera actress vanishing with a singer. And that sort of scared him a little bit. We just went to the registry office and got married. We had very little money. The only person who had anything at all was me, because Ron had spent everything he ever earned on camera equipment. But we found a fibre box, really, at the edge of the industrial area, under the flight path at Mortdale.
Listen, first off, I think we'll do the fish feeding sequences.
Ron was an exceptional human being, in my mind. Very clever, very gentle.
We'll keep our eye open for that manta ray, because if he swims around, we want to take advantage.
If I'd done a good job, he'd pat me on the knee. He'd say, that was good, Valerie. That's big time loving from Ron. Ron was an old-fashioned man, and a woman had her place and a man had his. I don't think he could even boil an egg, though he could make toast. I think that's how marriages were once. We each filled a niche, and it worked. We started selling to television, and that was a big thing.
Growing up, I remember being at home on a Sunday night with my parents, watching wildlife documentaries on TV. It was the thing we all did then. And Ron and Val Taylor would pop up frequently. We'd never seen anything like it before.
Off the northeast coast of Australia, billions of tiny coral polyps have created one of nature's awesome engineering feats.
Our early films were a little bit like science fiction. We were in an alien environment about which the human race knew very little. The abundance of life on the Barrier Reef was extraordinary. I'm lucky. I've seen things that don't exist anymore.
You know, they brought the underwater world into the home, both through photography and their movies. The two of them together were just an amazing unit. Both of them were like dolphins in the water.
I fly when I'm underwater. I can see something way over there and fly across to it. It's wonderful. You know, I pass a turtle, and if I swim exactly like it does, I can swim with it, as close as I want. Eels. You can befriend an eel so quickly.
She had a great relationship with moray eels. You know, she'd go up and tickle them under the chin.
Massive moray eels with teeth on them that had been known for, you know, taking people's fingers off. And these creatures had come out and greet her. Valerie was always interacting with underwater marine life, but today they pretty much train you in your dive course that you're not allowed to touch anything because you might disturb it. Valerie and Ron never operated like that.
The sea snake is reputed to be 20 times more venomous than the cobra.
And by the end of the 60s, they were gaining quite a reputation for being underwater filmmakers.
We started to make ourselves our first big money. We could live on our photography.
They moved between working on their own documentaries and then going off and working on other people's projects.
I wonder what he's up to, Skip.
You wouldn't catch me swimming here. Dad calls it Shark's Paradise.
We worked in the late 60s on several television shows filming underwater. And probably one we worked on the most was Skippy. Skippy, the bush kangaroo.
Skippy was massive back in the day. It was about a kid and his kangaroo, and there would always be someone that got into trouble.
I was good at writing scenarios, and I was even better at writing underwater into them. And I even wrote myself into a couple.
You're Mr. Hammond's boy?
Yep. And that's Skippy.
Hello, Skip. If you're really interested, you can come out with me. I could do with an assistant.
You mean it?
Why not? Hop in.
Valerie embarks on a little mission with Sonny, but then one thing leads to another.
Hurry, Skip! Hurry!
Skippy swims for help and saves the day, as usual.
I did a bit of stunt work. Was dangled from a helicopter for a long time. I was eventually dropped.
It was really entertaining, but there was one particular story that Ron and Valerie worked on that had a really profound effect on them and their future filmmaking.
And it had grey nurse sharks in it. And we knew we could get them at Seal Rocks. We went up there, and to our horror, when we went out to the shark gutter, there were all these dead sharks. Someone had gone down there with a powerhead and killed every one. It was very distressing. When I saw all those poor dead grey nurse drifting across the sand in the gutter, I decided I would never kill another shark. I realised that it was a terrible thing. That was their domain, that's where they belonged. We didn't belong there. We should just learn to live with them or leave them alone.
I can remember the first sharks I ever killed. I felt pretty good about it, but I've got over that. I feel sorry when I see them dying.
Ron and Valerie started to observe sharks at close quarters and understand that, this was an amazing animal. And they had that epiphany of looking closer at the animals and understanding that these were, incredible evolutionary products.
Dislike them? Oh, no, I think sharks are one of the most beautiful creatures you can find in the ocean.
And that's when they started the love affair, not only with the underwater world, but specifically with sharks.
In 1969, Ron and myself were involved with 4 Americans in a film called Blue Water, White Death.
We're looking for the animal that I think is considered to be the most dangerous predator still living in the world, the great white shark.
It was a really big project involving some of the world's top divers and filmmakers. They all shared a deep fascination with sharks, especially the great white shark.
Well, you're going to use the far cylinder first.
You turn this one off and turn this one on.
Yeah.
But the first sharks they came across were the equally dangerous oceanic whitetips.
There's a shark, white tip, right under the bow.
There's another one. There's another one. There are 4 down here now.
Oceanic white-tipped sharks are the most dangerous sharks in the world.
The death throe vibrations of the whales attract sharks from miles away.
Ron and Valerie and the others on the expedition were diving just below a dead whale carcass, which had blood and stuff all around them, and it was terrifying footage, No one had done anything like it before.
That was the greatest adventure of our lives. The whole idea is to get out of your cage and make yourself a place in the pack. Peter Gimble, he was the director, turned to me and he said, "Valerie, there's no shame in not coming." I said, "Oh, I'm coming." There must have been well over 100 sharks, probably over 200. The water's deep, very, very deep. It's in the middle of the ocean. There was no way out if they decided to attack. No way.
Ron, of course, had a fairly sizable camera unit that I guess he could use to hit sharks or push them away.
Valerie had just a stick, fending the sharks off and protecting the guys in the water filming.
The oceanic whitetip has one thing it does before it bites. It bumps you. And Peter Gimble decided when they bumped you, bump them back harder, which we did. We had made ourselves a place in the pack, and they didn't bother us anymore.
I think blue water white death had a huge impact on people around the world, especially as a diver. It taught me to just go for it, basically. Just get in there and go for it.
It was very important for Ron and I to prove that sharks were not the enemy.
This is William Shatner inviting you to come with us as Ron and Val Taylor unfold the truly unusual story of the vanishing grey nurse.
Ron and I made a television series. We called it Inner Space. That series was a turning point. One of the episodes was the first film we ever made with a strong conservation story.
Shark and man, eyeball to eyeball. They are not aggressive, but neither are they afraid.
Ron and Valerie set out to show the world that the grey nurse shark isn't the predator or the monster that everyone made it out to be.
They look nasty, but we learned that they weren't, just through experience. They've got long teeth. They're not flesh-biting teeth. They're fish-catching teeth. They couldn't bite a lump out of you, no matter how hard they tried.
Back in the 1960s and 1970s, the grey nurse shark, which was prolific along the east coast, was being hunted to almost the point of extinction. The puppies of the ocean, as Val calls them.
They gather during the day in gutters and just sit around quietly, minding their own business.
They visit another of the grey nurse's favourite retreats, Montague Island.
We knew all the hot spots off the Queensland coast and the New South Wales coast. We went to these places and hardly found a shark. And that was a bit of a shock, because they used to be everywhere. And that's when I went to work to have the grey nurse made a protected shark.
Ron and Valerie were definitely pioneers in advocating protection of sharks. They realised that these species were in danger, and they really stepped up and did something about it. But the next film they worked on threatened to undermine all the good work they were doing.
There is a creature alive today.
My late husband, Peter Benchley, wrote a novel called Jaws.
We thought it'd be just a second-rate film.
Ron was asked to shoot all the live action of the great white sharks.
People who saw the movie Jaws are afraid of sharks.
If you go into the water, there's always a very slight risk.
I looked down, my leg is in a shark's mouth, and I called out to get the cameras rolling. I've been bitten, I think it's bad.
It wasn't that long after that she was back in the water.
I learnt a lot about sharks, biting in many different ways.
She's 87 now and she's still out there trying to protect things.
I am fighting right now for grey nurse habitat.
She'll go into the box still saying, we've got to conserve that.